The silver cutlery clattered to silence. Conversations froze mid-sentence as every patron in the upscale Manhattan restaurant turned toward the corner booth. Sarah Maxwell sat perfectly still, her chestnut hair framing an expression that remained controlled despite the verbal assault. Her fingers pressed against the table's mahogany surface, the only visible sign of her distress. "You're using a wheelchair, and this has to be some kind of joke." The man's voice sliced through the restaurant atmosphere like a blade. Richard Bennett, investment banker, and Sarah's blind date, gestured dismissively at her custom mobility chair. The dating profile said nothing about this. Sarah maintained her composure outwardly. Internally, something sharp twisted. She'd known this outcome was possible when agreeing to meet someone from the exclusive dating app her assistant had convinced her to try. Yet the rejection stung with unexpected force. "Listen, this is ridiculous," Richard continued, rising from his seat. "You're supposed to be Sarah Maxwell, the pharmaceutical executive. You never mentioned being," he waved his hand toward her chair, "damaged goods." Audible gasps rippled through the dining room. A server stood frozen nearby, water pitcher suspended mid-pour. At the bar, a couple whispered frantically while stealing glances at the unfolding scene. Sarah straightened, her posture, dignity intact despite the humiliation. "I wasn't aware I needed to provide a medical disclosure for casual conversation. If you came seeking some fantasy fulfillment, I'm clearly not your match." Richard released a cruel laugh that carried across the room. "You're absolutely right about that. You're definitely not." Then, speaking louder as if ensuring the entire restaurant could hear, "I thought I was meeting Sarah Maxwell, the pharmaceutical CEO, the brilliant biotech innovator. Not some charity case looking for sympathy." There it was, the revelation that made the situation even worse. He'd known exactly who she was professionally. Now every patron knew too. Whispered conversations erupted around them. Someone discreetly raised a phone camera. Another diner mouthed silently, "Is that really her?" Sarah sat motionless. Her business blazer was impeccably tailored, her hairstyle professionally. She appeared every inch the powerful corporate leader she was known to be. Yet in this moment she felt reduced to a spectacle, exposed for public examination. 5 years after the accident that put her in this chair, she still encountered moments like these. Moments that made her feel less than whole. "What a disaster," someone muttered from a nearby table. Her fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. She reached for her purse, preparing to leave alone with whatever dignity remained. Then a calm, steady voice cut through the tension. "I believe that's quite enough." Every head in the restaurant turned toward the entrance. A man stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded denim jacket and scuffed work boots. Grease stains marked his hands. Clearly a working man who didn't belong in this upscale establishment. He moved with quiet determination through the restaurant, his eyes focused not on Richard, but directly on Sarah. James Harrison had come to fix the restaurant's malfunctioning air conditioning system. What he found instead was a situation that needed a different kind of repair. He walked past the stunned hostess and approached Sarah's table. His hand came to rest gently on the back of her chair. "Are you ready to leave?" he asked softly. Sarah blinked in surprise and confusion. Was this another elaborate joke at her expense? But his gaze was steady and kind, not pitying, just genuinely present. She gave a small nod of agreement. James turned to face Richard. "She deserves considerably better treatment than this." With that simple statement, he carefully turned her chair and guided her toward the exit. No one attempted to stop them. No one dared to interfere. They left behind a restaurant full of stunned silence and the lingering image of a man who hadn't needed to raise his voice to display genuine courage. Outside, the evening air felt cool and carried the faint scent of approaching rain. Sarah felt the tension in her shoulders beginning to dissolve. James released his gentle hold on her chair once they reached the sidewalk. "I apologize for interrupting," he said. "I couldn't simply stand by and watch that treatment continue." She looked up at him, noting his stubbled jawline, the oil stains on his clothes, the tired but kind eyes. "You don't even know who I am." He shrugged with simple honesty. "Didn't need to know. Basic human decency doesn't require an introduction." Sarah exhaled slowly, feeling some of the pain beginning to ease. "Thank you for that." He smiled warmly. "I'm James, by the way. James Harrison." Despite everything she'd just endured, a soft, surprised laugh escaped her. Sarah Maxwell, it's a pleasure to meet you, James. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the usual sounds of city life, as her heartbeat gradually returned to normal. I never got the chance to eat, she admitted. Skipped lunch to prepare for, well, that experience. James glanced back at the restaurant they just left. Doesn't look like you missed anything worthwhile. After a brief pause, he continued. There's a food cart about 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy, just honest food, but their grilled sandwiches have quite a reputation in the neighborhood. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. That sounds perfect. He grinned. Excellent. Let's go. For the first time in a long while, Sarah found herself following someone not out of obligation or social expectation, but by genuine choice. Because sometimes healing begins with disaster, and sometimes the right person appears precisely when the world seems to turn its back. The evening breeze carried the mixed scents of rain-dampened pavement and grilling food as Sarah moved slowly down the quiet street. James walked beside her, hands casually tucked into his jacket pockets. He didn't hover anxiously or push her chair unless she requested assistance. He simply walked at a steady, unhurried pace that naturally matched hers without any apparent effort. Did you manage to eat anything before the incident? He trailed off, his voice careful and considerate. She shook her head, a small smile appearing on her lips. I didn't exactly have the opportunity. He chuckled softly. I figured as much. They reached the food cart, a simple setup with string lights hanging above it, casting a warm glow over the small gathering of mismatched chairs and tables. The aroma of grilling meat and spices filled the air. As James ordered for them both, Sarah observed him with curiosity. There was something refreshingly straightforward about him. No pretense, no careful calculation that she was accustomed to seeing in her corporate world. When the food arrived, the server moved clumsily, and a streak of thick sauce slipped from one sandwich, splattering across Sarah's shoe and ankle. She froze completely. Heat rushed to her face. This was precisely the kind of accident she dreaded. Moments that highlighted her chair, her differences, her inability to react quickly to unexpected situations. She braced herself for awkward apologies, for the server's flustered pity for James's uncomfortable silence and possible retreat. Instead, James calmly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded cloth, the kind a mechanic might habitually carry. Hold on, he said quietly. Before she could protest, he crouched beside her chair. With easy, unhurried movements, he carefully dabbed the sauce from the leather of her shoe. Then, as if it were the most natural action in the world, he gently lifted her foot, supporting it with both hands, and placed it back onto the footrest of her chair. Not a hint of hesitation, not a flicker of pity or discomfort, just care, respect, and practical kindness. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. No one had touched her like that with such natural ease and respect since before her accident. Every gesture from others had been heavy with awkwardness or saturated with condescending pity. But James's touch was different. Steady, practical, genuinely kind. Her eyes stung unexpectedly. She blinked rapidly, willing the tears to stay hidden. There, he said simply, straightening up. Good as new. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, unsure what words could adequately convey the depth of her gratitude. Thank you, she whispered finally. He shrugged lightly. It's just sauce, no big deal. No, she said, her voice stronger this time. It isn't just sauce. Their eyes met across the small table. For a moment, the chatter of other diners, the hiss of the grill, the clatter of plastic utensils, all of it faded into background noise. Sarah saw in him something she hadn't expected to find. A man who looked at her without hidden agenda, without judgment or calculation. She realized with a sharp ache in her chest that this was the first time in years someone had treated her as complete and whole, not defined by what she had lost, but recognized for who she actually was. James broke the silence with a smile, gesturing toward the food. Better eat before it gets cold. Trust me, food like this doesn't wait around. She laughed softly, a sound she barely recognized as her own. She took a bite and for the first time that evening tasted something simple and real. Garlic ginger, the char from the grill. It wasn't just food. It represented freedom from expectation and pretense. Sitting under the glow of yellow lights across from a mechanic with grease still visible on his hands, Sarah Maxwell, CEO Survivor Woman, felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt truly seen. So, Sarah said between bites, you fix air conditioners. Among other things, James replied. I'm actually a mechanical engineer by training. I run a small repair shop now, specializing in customized equipment for people with mobility challenges. Sarah paused sandwich halfway to her mouth. Wait, really? James nodded, his expression brightening with genuine enthusiasm. Started out as a side project, became my full-time passion. Regular equipment repairs pay the bills, but the adaptive technology work, that's where the real satisfaction comes from. That's unexpected, Sarah admitted. She studied him with renewed interest. How did you get into that field? A shadow crossed his face briefly. Started after my sister's car accident. The standard equipment didn't work well for her specific needs, so I began modifying things. Word spread. Turned out there's a lot of people who need customized solutions. Your sister, is she? She passed away 3 years ago, James said quietly. Complications from her injuries. But by then I'd already committed to helping others in similar situations. Sarah felt a connection, forming threads of shared understanding weaving between them. I'm sorry about your sister. He nodded in acknowledgement, then deliberately lightened his tone. So what about you? What does Sarah Maxwell do when she's not being stood up by jerks in expensive suits? She laughed despite herself. I run a pharmaceutical company, Maxwell Pharmaceuticals. We're currently developing treatments for neurodegenerative conditions. Impressive, he said, and unlike the hollow flattery she was accustomed to, his admiration seemed genuine. Family business. My father started it. I took over as CEO 2 years before my accident. She surprised herself with how easily she mentioned the accident, usually a subject she avoided with new acquaintances. May I ask what happened? James's question came without the typical discomfort or morbid curiosity that usually accompanied such inquiries. Car crash, spinal cord injury. She kept it brief, clinical. 5 years ago? James didn't respond with the standard platitudes. Instead, he simply nodded. The world doesn't make things easy afterward, does it? No, she agreed, feeling the truth of his statement. It doesn't. As they continued eating, their conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from favorite books to childhood memories. James described his workshop with such vivid detail that Sarah could almost see the organized chaos of tools and half-finished projects. She found herself sharing stories from medical school before she joined the family business, details she rarely discussed with anyone. I should get back, James said, eventually checking his watch. Left my tools at the restaurant. Hopefully they haven't thrown them out. Right, Sarah said, feeling oddly disappointed. The air conditioner. It won't fix itself, he replied with a grin. Then with hesitation unusual for his direct manner, I've enjoyed this, though, more than I expected to tonight. So have I, Sarah admitted. James pulled out his phone. Would it be too forward to ask for your number? Maybe we could continue this conversation another time. Sarah considered the request. Her natural caution battled with the unexpected connection she'd felt with this stranger. You know who I am now, my position, my company. I know who you are as a person I just shared a meal with, he corrected gently. The rest is just details. With that simple statement, her decision was made. She recited her number and he entered it into his phone. I should warn you, she added, my life is complicated. The company, the public scrutiny. Everyone's life is complicated in different ways, James replied. I'm just asking for a conversation, not your 5-year plan. She smiled at that. Fair enough. After James insisted on paying for their meal, you can get the next one, he said with confidence that made her heart skip. They made their way back toward the restaurant. The air had cooled further, and Sarah felt the first few raindrops on her face. I have my driver waiting around the corner, she explained. Will you be all right getting back to your tools? Don't worry about me, he assured her. I've weathered worse than a little rain. They paused at the intersection, lingering in that awkward moment of goodbye between new acquaintances. Thank you again, Sarah said, meaning far more than just the meal. For everything tonight. It was my pleasure, Sarah Maxwell, James replied. With a final smile and a small wave, he turned and jogged back toward the restaurant as the rain began to fall more steadily. Sarah watched him go, a strange mixture of emotions swirling within her. When her phone buzzed a few minutes later, and her driver navigated the rain-slick streets, She couldn't help the smile that spread across her face at the message. The AC is fixed. The restaurant manager offered me free meals for a year. I think he felt guilty about what happened to you. His loss is my gain. Looking forward to our next conversation. James, the next morning, Sarah's executive assistant Marcus looked up in surprise as she wheeled herself into the Maxwell Pharmaceuticals headquarters with an unusually bright expression. Good morning, he said cautiously, falling into step beside her chair as she moved toward the elevator. I was going to call. The board meeting's been moved up to 9 instead of 10. That's fine, Sarah replied, her tone lighter than Marcus had heard in months. Send me the updated briefing materials. He studied her with poorly concealed curiosity. So, last night went well. Sarah gave him a measured look. The date was a disaster, as I predicted it would be. Oh, Marcus's face fell. He'd been the one to convince her to try the dating app. I'm sorry to hear that. The elevator arrived and they stepped inside. Don't be, Sarah said as the doors closed. Sometimes disasters lead to unexpected opportunities. Before Marcus could question her further, the elevator opened on the executive floor, revealing Sarah's father, Robert Maxwell, waiting with an expression that signaled trouble. Morning, Dad, Sarah said, wheeling past him into her office. Robert followed, dismissing Marcus with a nod. He closed the door behind them. I received a concerning call this morning, he began without preamble, from Richard Bennett. He said there was an incident at Astor's last night. Sarah positioned her chair behind her desk, placing herself on equal footing with her father. Is that what he called it, an incident? Robert's expression tightened. He mentioned you brought someone with you. A confrontation occurred. That's not what happened, Sarah replied evenly. Bennett humiliated me publicly when he discovered I use a wheelchair. A stranger intervened and helped me leave with dignity. That's the full story. Robert sank into the chair opposite her desk, his anger visibly shifting to concern. Why didn't you call me? I handled it myself, Dad. I'm 38 years old. Sarah, you know how delicate our position is right now. With the clinical trials approaching and investors watching our every move, does my using a wheelchair somehow impact our clinical trial results? Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp. Does it affect my ability to lead this company? Robert sighed heavily. You know that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I'm concerned about you, he said, his voice softening. And yes, about the company too. Public perception matters especially now. Sarah's expression hardened. My disability is not a public relations issue to be managed. Perhaps we should hire personal security for you, Robert suggested, shifting tactics. After what happened? No. Her response was immediate and firm. I don't need guards shadowing my every move. I need to live my life. Robert looked like he wanted to argue further, but instead stood and moved toward the door. The board is expecting updates on the clinical trial preparations. I hope you're ready. I always am, Sarah replied. After her father left, Sarah stared at the closed door, the morning's lightness now overshadowed by familiar frustrations. Her phone chimed with a text message notification. Expecting more board materials from Marcus, she was surprised to see James's name on the screen. Morning, hope you slept well. Was serious about that next meal. My workshop is having an open house this weekend for clients and supporters. Very casual. Thought you might be interested in seeing what we do. No pressure. Sarah found herself smiling despite the tension from her father's visit. She began typing a reply when Marcus knocked and entered with a stack of files. The board is gathering in the conference room, he informed her. And Dr. Patel called. There's an issue with the latest test results. Sarah set her phone aside, CEO mode, engaging fully. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes and get Patel on the line. I want details before I face the board. As Marcus hurried away, Sarah glanced at her phone once more. The message from James remained unanswered, a reminder of a world outside these glass walls and corporate pressures. A world where she was just Sarah, not CEO Maxwell. Later, she promised herself. First, she had a company to run. The board meeting was brutal. Sarah sat at the head of the table, surrounded by 12 executive board members, most of whom had served since her father's time as CEO. The tension in the room was palpable as Dr. Lakshmi Patel, head of research and development, delivered the latest update on their flagship drug. The preliminary results from the latest round of testing show unexpected side effects in 12% of participants. Dr. Patel explained, her usual confidence dimmed. Nothing life-threatening but significant enough to raise concerns with the FDA if we don't address them before formal trials begin. Sarah watched the faces around the table darken. Maxwell Pharmaceuticals had invested nearly 5 years and hundreds of millions of dollars into developing Nervastor, a revolutionary treatment for degenerative nerve conditions. Any delay now would be costly, perhaps catastrophically so. What's the nature of the side effects? Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady. Primarily issues with the delivery mechanism, Dr. Patel replied. The compound itself works as expected, but the current method causes inflammation at the injection site that may indicate potential long-term problems. James Wallace, the chief financial officer, cleared his throat. Every month of delay costs us approximately $20 million. Our investors are already getting nervous about the timeline. They'll be more than nervous if we rush a flawed product to market, Sarah countered. Her father spoke up from his position at the opposite end of the table. Perhaps we should consider Richard's proposal after all. Sarah tensed. Richard Forrester, head of marketing, had been pushing for months to reposition their messaging around Nervastor. His strategy involved implicit promises about the drug's effectiveness that went beyond what their data currently supported, walking a dangerous ethical and legal line. Absolutely not, Sarah stated firmly. We are not making claims we can't substantiate. It's not about making false claims, Richard defended. It's about creating hope, positive messaging that keeps investors confident while we solve these technical issues. Creating false hope for patients with degenerative conditions isn't just unethical, it's cruel, Sarah said, her voice low but intense. I won't approve marketing that exploits vulnerable people's desperation. Robert Maxwell leaned forward. Sarah, be reasonable. We need to buy time. By lying, she challenged, looking directly at her father. Is that how we built this company? The room fell silent. Sarah rarely opposed her father so openly in board meetings. We need solutions, not marketing spin, she continued. Dr. Patel, how long would it take to develop an alternative delivery system? Dr. Patel hesitated. With our current resources and approach, 4 to 6 months minimum. That timeline is unacceptable, Robert interjected. Our Q3 projections depend on moving forward with clinical trials next month. Sarah's mind raced, considering options. What if we brought in outside expertise, someone with experience in alternative delivery mechanisms? At this stage, Richard scoffed, the confidentiality concerns alone. I may know someone, Sarah said, a half-formed idea taking shape. Give me 48 hours to explore an alternative approach before we make any decisions about delaying the timeline or changing our marketing strategy. Robert studied his daughter carefully. 48 hours, he finally agreed. But we need concrete solutions, not just possibilities. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, Robert lingered. When they were alone, he approached Sarah's chair. Who do you have in mind? He asked. Sarah met his gaze directly. I'm not ready to discuss that yet. Robert sighed. You've always been stubborn, just like your mother. His expression softened slightly. She would be proud of your principles, you know. I just worry they'll be your undoing in this business. Maybe, Sarah acknowledged, but they're non-negotiable. After her father left, Sarah pulled out her phone and reread James's message about the workshop open house. She began typing, I'd like to see your workshop sooner than the weekend. Tomorrow, if possible. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Professional, not personal, but important. His reply came minutes later. Professional consultation, intriguing. Workshop opens at 8 a.m. Coffee's terrible, but the company's decent. Sarah smiled despite the pressure weighing on her. I'll bring better coffee. See you at 8. The next morning, Sarah directed her driver to a converted warehouse in an industrial area that was gradually transforming into artist studios and small manufacturing spaces. The sign above the entrance read simply, Harrison Adaptive Technologies. Balancing a tray with 2 coffee cups in her lap, she navigated her wheelchair through the entrance. The space inside surprised her. It was larger than expected, divided into distinct areas. One section housed traditional mechanical equipment for repairs, while another contained specialized workstations with complex designs and partially assembled devices she didn't recognize. James emerged from a back office, wiping his hands on a cloth. His face brightened when he saw her. You actually brought coffee. I was joking about our coffee being terrible, but it absolutely is, so thank you. I take coffee very seriously, Sarah replied, handing him a cup. Consider it a consultation fee. He accepted it with a smile. Must be an important consultation. Sarah glanced around, noting two other people working in different areas of the shop. Is there somewhere we can talk privately? James nodded, leading her to a small office in the back. Unlike the pristine, minimalist design of her corporate office, this space was cluttered with blueprints, mechanical parts, and books stacked in precarious piles. A large drafting table dominated one wall, covered with detailed technical drawings. Sorry for the mess, he said hastily, clearing a chair for her to position beside it. Wasn't expecting VIP visitors today. This isn't a VIP visit, Sarah clarified. This is me seeking your professional expertise. James set his coffee down and leaned against the drafting table. I'm listening. Sarah took a deep breath. How much do you know about pharmaceutical delivery systems? His eyebrows rose slightly. Enough to be dangerous. My engineering background included biomedical applications. Why bum? She explained the situation with nerve restore, careful to provide only information that wouldn't violate confidentiality agreements. She outlined the delivery mechanism problem without revealing the specific compound or its complete application. James listened attentively, asking occasional questions that revealed a deeper understanding of the field than she'd anticipated. So basically, you need a delivery system that minimizes inflammation at the injection site while ensuring consistent release of the compound over time, he summarized. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Our current approach uses a standard injection method with a time-release polymer, but it's causing more tissue reaction than expected. James turned to his drafting table and began sketching rapidly. Have you considered a microinfusion approach instead? Something like this. Sarah watched in fascination as a design took shape under his hands. His explanation grew increasingly technical, yet remained clear enough for her to follow the core concepts. The primary advantage, James explained, pointing to a specific component in his drawing, is that this distribution method creates significantly less pressure on surrounding tissues. It's similar to technology I developed for controlled delivery of pain medication for spinal injury patients. Sarah studied the design with growing excitement. This could work, but the development timeline, with the right team and resources, 4 weeks, maybe less, James said confidently. 4 weeks. Sarah couldn't hide her skepticism. Our R&D department estimated months. James shrugged. No offense to your R&D department, but they're probably approaching this from a purely pharmaceutical perspective. This is an engineering problem masquerading as a pharmaceutical one. And you could solve it, Sarah challenged, with access to your testing data and materials? James considered the question seriously. Yes, I believe so. Sarah felt both hope and hesitation. This would require bringing you inside our confidentiality firewall. The board would have concerns about an unknown mechanic having access to your proprietary technology, James finished for her. I'd be concerned too in their position. Sarah studied him thoughtfully. Why did you leave biomedical engineering? With your skills, you could be working for any major medical device company. A shadow passed over James's face. He set down his pencil and was quiet for a moment. After my sister's accident, everything changed, he finally said. I was working for Biotech Solutions, designing delivery systems for their pharmaceuticals, ironically enough. When Emily needed specialized equipment, I discovered how inadequate most adaptive technology was for real-world use. I asked to shift my focus to developing better solutions, but the company wasn't interested. Sarah nodded slowly. Biotech Solutions was one of their major competitors. So you left to start this workshop instead? Not immediately, James continued. First, I tried developing the adaptive technology on my own time while still at biotech. Then I discovered something troubling in one of our core projects, data suggesting potential long-term issues with a delivery system that was being fast-tracked for approval. Sarah felt a chill. What happened? I raised concerns, repeatedly. They were ignored. When I threatened to take the information to regulators, I was offered a choice: a generous severance package with an extensive non-disclosure agreement or legal action for alleged intellectual property theft related to my side projects. They forced you out, Sarah said quietly. James's smile held no humor. with an ironclad agreement that prevents me from discussing specific details about their projects or technologies. I took the severance, used it to set up this workshop, and focused on helping people like my sister directly. Sarah processed this information, seeing James in a new light. Biotech Solutions isn't known for ethical business practices. No, James agreed, they're not. The implications of his background hung between them. James had specific expertise in exactly what she needed, but his history with a competitor complicated matters enormously. The board would never approve bringing you in officially, Sarah concluded. Probably not, James acknowledged. Though for the record, my non-compete only covers specific technologies I worked on at biotech, not general consulting. Sarah considered her options. What if it wasn't official or a prototype developed independently based on publicly available information about similar challenges? You mean what if I happen to develop a delivery system that might be applicable to your needs without having direct access to your proprietary data? James raised an eyebrow. Theoretically possible, significantly harder and less certain. But possible, Sarah pressed. James studied her with newfound respect. You're serious about this? I don't want to compromise your ethics or our intellectual property, Sarah clarified, but I need a solution, and you seem uniquely qualified to provide one. James turned back to his draft, adding details with quick, precise strokes. I'd need to know more about the specific requirements, information that could be shared without violating confidentiality. Properties of the delivery medium, temperature, sensitivity, molecular size. I can provide that, Sarah assured him. James finished his sketch and handed it to her. Then let's see what's possible. Sarah looked down at the drawing, then back at James. And why are you willing to help? You barely know me. James considered the question carefully. Because I recognized something in you that night at the restaurant. The same determination I saw in my sister. She never let her injury define her limitations. He paused. And because I've seen what happens when pharmaceutical companies prioritize profits over patients, you strike me as someone who hasn't forgotten why these medicines matter in the first place. Sarah felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Recognition, connection, possibility. Thank you for that. A knock at the office door interrupted them. A young woman with bright red hair poked her head in. James, Mrs. Peterson is here for her chair adjustment, and she stopped, eyes widening as she recognized Sarah. Oh, sorry to interrupt. It's fine, Katie, James assured her. Tell Mrs. Peterson, I'll be right out. After Katie left, he turned back to Sarah. Duty calls. Wheelchair brake system needs recalibration. Of course. Sarah gathered her things, tucking the drawing carefully into her portfolio. I should get back to the office anyway. As James walked her toward the exit, they passed a teenage boy being fitted for what appeared to be a specialized arm brace. The boy's face lit up when he saw James. Mr. H, check it out. I can grip much better with the new adjustments. He demonstrated by picking up a small ball, his movements clearly challenging but successful. Looking good, Tyler, James said, his entire demeanor shifting to one of enthusiastic encouragement. Keep working those exercises we talked about. Next week, we'll try the basketball attachment. The boy nodded eagerly, then noticed Sarah. His eyes widened slightly at her wheelchair, but without the pity or discomfort she usually encountered. Instead, he simply gave a friendly nod before returning to his exercises. Sarah observed the interaction with interest. The workshop had a distinctly different atmosphere from any medical facility she'd experienced. More collaborative, more human. You've created something special here, she observed as they reached the door. It's a work in progress, James replied modestly, but it matters. Every adjustment, every custom design, they give people back pieces of independence they thought were lost forever. Sarah understood that mission on a deeply personal level. I'll contact you with the additional information we discussed, and she hesitated, then continued, I'm still interested in that open house this weekend, if the invitation stands. James's smile reached his eyes. Absolutely. Saturday, 2 to 6. Casual dress code. Things tend to get hands-on around here. I'll keep that in mind, Sarah said, returning his smile before heading to her waiting car. As her driver pulled away, Sarah glanced back at the unassuming warehouse. In just 2 days, James Harrison had upended her expectations twice. First as the stranger who'd rescued her from public humiliation, and now as a potential solution to her company's most pressing problem. She wasn't entirely sure what to make of him, but for the first time in years, she felt something that had been missing from her carefully controlled life. Unpredictability and the peculiar thrill of not knowing what might happen next. The following morning, Sarah arrived at the office earlier than usual. She spent 2 hours compiling a file of non-proprietary information about the delivery system requirements, details that could be publicly discussed without revealing trade secrets. At 9, she summoned Dr. Patel to her office. "I may have found a solution to our delivery system problem," Sarah began without preamble. Dr. Patel looked skeptical. In less than 2 days, Sarah handed her James's sketch with accompanying notes. "What do you think of this approach, technically speaking?" The research director studied the design, her expression shifting from doubt to intrigue. "This is innovative. The microinfusion concept addresses several of our core issues." She looked up at Sarah. "Where did this come from?" "A consultant with a background in biomedical engineering and delivery systems," Sarah replied carefully. "He believes a prototype could be developed in under 4 weeks. 4 weeks, Dr. Patel echoed Sarah's earlier skepticism. "That's extremely ambitious, but theoretically possible." Dr. Patel studied the design again. "With the right expertise, perhaps, but who is this consultant? I know everyone in this field, and this approach is unlike anything I've seen." Sarah hesitated. "He previously worked for Biotech Solutions." Dr. Patel's eyes widened. "Sarah, the board would never—" "The board doesn't need to know yet," Sarah interrupted. "Not until we have something concrete to show them." "You're asking me to work with an unknown consultant off the books on our most important project." Dr. Patel's tone made clear how problematic she found this suggestion. "I'm asking you to review a promising approach and give me your professional assessment," Sarah clarified. "If the concept has merit, then we can discuss next steps." Dr. Patel studied Sarah carefully. In 5 years of working together, Sarah had never proposed anything remotely this unorthodox. "This matters to you personally." "Why, Sarah wheeled her chair to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "Do you know why my mother started this company with my father?" "To develop better treatments for degenerative conditions," Dr. Patel replied. "It's part of company lore." "She was diagnosed with early onset ALS when I was 12, Sarah continued. "The treatments available then were minimal. She and my father, a pharmaceutical chemist, decided to focus on finding better options. She didn't live to see the company's success, but her vision shaped everything we do." Sarah turned back to face Dr. Patel. "We started this company to help people, not to satisfy shareholders. Nerve Restore could change lives, but only if we get it right. I believe this approach has merit, and I'm willing to explore unconventional paths to make it happen." Dr. Patel was quiet for a long moment. "I'll need to meet this consultant and review his credentials, and I'll need more detailed specifications for this design." "Fair enough," Sarah agreed. "I've arranged a meeting for this afternoon off-site." "You have already planned this," Dr. Patel observed with a hint of admiration. "What if I had refused?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Then I would have found another way, but I'm glad you're willing to consider it." Later that afternoon, Sarah and Dr. Patel met James at his workshop. The initial introduction was tense, with Dr. Patel grilling James about his background experience and specific knowledge of delivery systems. To Sarah's relief, James handled the interrogation with calm professionalism, answering each question thoroughly while acknowledging the limitations of his recent experience. The atmosphere shifted when James demonstrated a prototype he'd built overnight, not of the delivery system itself, but of a testing apparatus that could help evaluate different approaches quickly. "You built this in less than 4 hours?" Dr. Patel asked, clearly impressed despite herself. "I had most of the components already," James explained. "It's similar to a device I designed for testing adaptive controls for different grip strengths." As the technical discussion deepened, Sarah observed the growing rapport between the scientist and the engineer. When James suggested a modification to his original design based on Dr. Patel's input about molecular stability, she knew a partnership was forming. 2 hours later, they had a rough plan. James would develop a prototype delivery system based on the parameters Dr. Patel provided, while she would prepare a testing protocol that could quickly validate or reject the approach. They would work separately but meet regularly to align their efforts. "If this works," Dr. Patel said as they prepared to leave, How do we explain it to the board? One step at a time, Sarah replied. Let's confirm the concept works first. Then we'll figure out how to present it. As Dr. Patel headed to her car, Sarah lingered behind with James. Thank you for doing this, she said. I know it's unconventional. I'm not doing it for Maxwell Pharmaceuticals, James replied honestly. I'm doing it because this technology could help people like my sister. Sarah nodded, understanding completely. Still planning on the open house tomorrow? Absolutely. Though I may be distracted by this project now, he admitted with a smile. I'll try not to take it personally, Sarah promised, matching his light tone. As she left, Sarah felt a curious mixture of professional excitement and personal anticipation. The delivery system project offered hope for both her company's flagship drug and her own emerging connection with James. For the first time since her accident, both aspects of her life, professional and personal, seemed to be opening up simultaneously, creating possibilities she hadn't dared imagine just days ago. The next day, Sarah arrived at Harrison Adaptive Technologies promptly at 2 p.m. for the open house. The workshop had been transformed. Workbenches displayed various adaptive technologies, from specialized wheelchair modifications to customized tools for people with limited grip strength. Guests moved between stations, some demonstrating the equipment, others watching with interest. James spotted her near the entrance and made his way over, dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt rather than his usual work clothes. You came, he said, his pleasure evident. I said I would, Sarah replied, taking in the busy workshop. Quite a turnout. We do this quarterly, James explained. It's part showcase, part community building. Most of our clients rarely meet others with similar challenges. This gives them a chance to connect. Sarah noticed the diversity of the attendees, people of all ages and backgrounds with various mobility aids and adaptive equipment. What struck her most was the atmosphere. Unlike the clinical, sometimes depressing environment of medical equipment showrooms, this space buzzed with energy and practical innovation. Come meet some people, James suggested, guiding her through the crowd. Over the next hour, Sarah was introduced to James's team and several of his clients. She met Katie, the red-haired woman from her previous visit, who turned out to be James' niece, his late sister's daughter, whom he'd raised since the accident. She met Tyler, the teenager with the arm brace, who proudly demonstrated how he could now play video games with his friends, thanks to custom controllers James had designed. Each introduction revealed another facet of James's world: practical problem-solving, community support, and a profound respect for each person's individual needs and dignity. And this, James said, leading her to a quiet corner where a sleek, ultra-modern wheelchair stood on a display, is our latest prototype. Sarah studied the chair with professional interest. Unlike her own high-end but fundamentally standard power chair, this model featured an innovative suspension system and control interface. May I, she asked, gesturing toward the controls. Be my guest, James encouraged. Sarah positioned herself to examine the chair's design more closely. The responsiveness is impressive, she noted, testing the joystick. And the balance system, it's unlike anything I've seen on the market. That's the point, James explained. Most manufacturers design for the average user in controlled environments. We focus on real-world conditions: uneven sidewalks, tight doorways, variable surfaces. Why hasn't a larger company picked this up? Sarah asked. The applications are obvious. James's expression tightened slightly. They have. 3 offers in the last year to buy the patents. I've declined. Why? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Because they wanted the technology, not the philosophy behind it, James explained. This design works because we developed it with direct input from users through hundreds of iterations based on real feedback. In corporate hands, it would become another premium product most people couldn't afford. Sarah recognized the implicit criticism of companies like her own. Not all corporate innovation is driven solely by profit, she defended gently. No, James acknowledged, but enough is to make me cautious. His expression softened. I didn't mean that as a criticism of your work, by the way. Yes, you did, Sarah replied with unexpected humor. And that's okay. Healthy skepticism keeps us honest. Their conversation was interrupted by Katie, who approached with refreshments. You two look serious, she observed, handing them drinks. Talking shop on a Saturday. Just admiring your uncle's latest creation, Sarah explained. He's been working on that one forever, Katie said with affectionate exasperation. Nights, weekends, it's been his obsession for months. Worth every minute, James insisted, especially now that the stabilization system actually works. As Katie moved on to other guests, Sarah noticed James watching her with a thoughtful expression. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking how different this is from where we met," he replied. "Hard to believe that was less than a week ago." Sarah nodded, feeling the truth of his observation. Life can change direction quickly. "Speaking of change," James said, his tone becoming more businesslike, "I made progress on our project this morning. The initial prototype design is coming together faster than I expected." "That's excellent," Sarah replied, equally professional. "Dr. Patel has been working on the testing protocols." She's cautiously optimistic. Their eyes met in shared understanding of what remained unspoken. The risks they were both taking on this unofficial collaboration and the potential significance if they succeeded. The moment was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. Sarah looked up to see a familiar figure entering the workshop. Her father, Robert Maxwell, accompanied by two men in business attire who were clearly out of place in this casual gathering. "Dad," Sarah said in disbelief, wheeling quickly toward him. "What are you doing here?" Robert's expression was grave as he approached. "I might ask you the same question, Sarah. When you didn't answer your phone and your driver said he'd brought you here again, I became concerned." "Concerned?" Sarah echoed incredulously. "I'm at a public event. Why would that concern you?" Robert's gaze shifted to James, who had followed Sarah. "Mr. Harrison, I presume?" James nodded, extending his hand. "James Harrison, welcome to our open house." Robert ignored the offered hand. "I understand you have been consulting with my daughter on a confidential Maxwell Pharmaceuticals project." Sarah felt a chill run through her. "How did you—" "Dr. Patel didn't tell me," Robert assured her, anticipating her question. "But the security logs showed she accessed certain files related to Nerve Restore shortly after meeting with you. It wasn't difficult to connect the dots." James stood straighter, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Maxwell, any discussions I've had with your daughter have remained within appropriate professional boundaries." "Professional boundaries?" Robert's voice carried thinly veiled disdain. "You're a repair shop owner with a history at our chief competitor. There are no appropriate professional boundaries for this situation." Several nearby guests had stopped to watch the confrontation. Sarah noticed Katie moving protectively closer to James. "Dad, this isn't the place for this conversation," Sarah said firmly. "If you want to discuss company business, we can do so at the office on Monday." "This can't wait until Monday," Robert insisted. "The board called an emergency session this morning after learning about your unauthorized consultation. They've requested your immediate return to headquarters." Sarah felt a surge of anger. "The board doesn't dictate my weekend activities." "They do when those activities potentially compromise our intellectual property," Robert countered. "Sarah, be reasonable. You've put yourself and the company in a precarious position." James stepped forward. "Mr. Maxwell, I understand your concerns, but I assure you no confidential information has been shared with me. I've simply offered a conceptual approach to a technical problem based on publicly available information." Robert's expression remained cold. "Your assurances mean nothing to me, Mr. Harrison. Your history speaks for itself." "What exactly do you know about my history?" James asked, his voice level, despite the provocation. "Enough," Robert replied dismissively. "Sarah, we need to leave, now." Sarah felt the weight of every gaze in the room. Her father stood before her, representing the company she dedicated her life to leading. Around her were James and his community, people who saw beyond limitations, who built solutions instead of barriers. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. "No," she said quietly but firmly. "I'm staying." Robert's expression hardened. "This isn't a request, Sarah. The board is waiting." "The board can continue waiting until Monday morning," Sarah replied evenly. "I'm in the middle of a social engagement that I have no intention of leaving prematurely." For a moment, father and daughter locked eyes in silent battle of wills. Finally, Robert turned to his companions. "Wait for me outside." After they left, he lowered his voice. "You're making a serious mistake. This man is using you to gain access to our research." Sarah's anger flared. "Using me? Is it so inconceivable that someone might actually value my expertise rather than seeing me as a vulnerability to be protected or exploited?" "That's not fair," Robert protested. "I've always supported your leadership, while treating my disability as a corporate liability," Sarah finished. Dad, I respect what you built with Mom. I've dedicated my life to carrying that legacy forward. But I'm not just CEO Maxwell. I'm also Sarah. And right now, Sarah needs you to trust her judgment. Robert studied his daughter with a complex mixture of frustration and concern. Monday morning, 8 a.m., full explanation to the board. He turned to James. And you, if anything from our company finds its way into a competitor's hands, I'll hold you personally responsible. With that final warning, he left, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. James was the first to speak. Well, that was dramatic. Against all odds, Sarah found herself laughing, a short surprise sound that broke the tension. I'm so sorry about that. Don't be, James assured her. Family complications come with the territory of being human. Gradually, the other guests returned to their conversations, the incident becoming just another ripple in the day's events. Your father is protective, James observed carefully. That's one word for it, Sarah agreed. She hesitated, then added, our project may have just become significantly more complicated. James nodded his understanding. We should probably discuss that, but not here, not now. He gestured to the workshop around them. This afternoon is for celebrating what's possible, not dwelling on obstacles. Sarah appreciated his perspective. You're right. Show me more of what you've created here. As they moved through the workshop together, Sarah felt a curious sense of liberation. Her father's interruption, though unwelcome, had forced a confrontation that had been brewing for years, not just about her leadership of the company, but about her identity beyond it. Monday's board meeting would be challenging, perhaps even threatening to her position as CEO. Yet somehow surrounded by people who saw possibilities rather than limitations, the prospect seemed less daunting than it might have just days before. For now, she would enjoy this afternoon in a world where problems existed to be solved, not avoided, where wheelchairs were pathways to freedom rather than symbols of loss. And perhaps most importantly, in the company of a man who saw her complete self, wheelchair and all. Monday morning arrived with a tension that crackled through the Maxwell Pharmaceuticals executive floor. Sarah positioned her wheelchair at the head of the boardroom table, her expression composed despite the storm brewing within. Board members filed in silently, their faces unreadable. Robert sat opposite, his eyes conveying a complex mixture of concern and disappointment. When everyone was seated, Sarah began without preamble. I understand you've called this meeting to discuss my consultation with James Harrison regarding our delivery system challenges. Harold Barnes, the longest-serving board member, leaned forward. Consultation is a generous term, Sarah. Unauthorized disclosure of proprietary information to a former employee of our chief competitor would be more accurate. No proprietary information was disclosed, Sarah countered firmly. Mr. Harrison was given only parameters that would be available in any pharmaceutical engineering textbook. Then what exactly did you hope to gain from this textbook discussion? Elaine Peterson, head of investor relations, asked with thinly veiled skepticism. Sarah gestured to Dr. Patel, who opened her laptop and displayed a series of technical diagrams. A solution to our delivery system problem, one that could save us months of development and millions in costs. For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Patel explained the innovative approach James had proposed, carefully emphasizing how the concept differed from anything Biotech Solutions had in development. The technical merits of the design gradually shifted the board's expressions from suspicion to cautious interest. The approach is novel, Dr. Patel concluded, and preliminary testing suggests it could be viable. Based on 3 days of unauthorized work, Robert interjected, work that exposed our most valuable intellectual property to unnecessary risk. Sarah met her father's gaze directly. The risks were calculated and minimized. No sensitive data left our secure servers. The conceptual approach came entirely from Mr. Harrison's previous experience with similar engineering challenges. Which raises another concern, Barnes added. This man's history with Biotech Solutions. He left under questionable circumstances. He left because he raised ethical concerns about patient safety that were ignored, Sarah corrected sharply. Something we should respect, not question. The room fell silent at her tone. Sarah rarely displayed anger in board meetings, maintaining the calm deliberation expected of a CEO. This passion caught them off guard. Let's assume your judgment about Harrison's character is sound, Peterson said finally. There remains the issue of protocol. You initiated this consultation without board approval, potentially exposing the company to significant liability. I explored a conceptual solution to an urgent problem, Sarah countered. As CEO, that falls within my authority. Not when it involves someone with direct ties to a competitor, Robert argued. Sarah's patience thinned. Harrison signed a non-disclosure agreement before any substantive discussions began. The same agreement we use with all external consultants. An NDA didn't stop him from leaving biotech with their information, Barnes pointed out. He didn't leave with their information, Sarah corrected, frustration evident. He left because they were suppressing concerning safety data. There's a significant difference. Robert sighed heavily. Sarah, your defense of this man suggests a personal investment that concerns me. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah's knuckles whitened against the armrests of her wheelchair. My interest in resolving our delivery system challenges is professional, she stated, her voice dangerously calm. But if you're implying I'm unable to separate personal feelings from business decisions, I'd remind you that you appointed me CEO because of my judgment, not despite it. Dr. Patel cleared her throat softly. If I may, the prototype design has genuine merit. While the circumstances are unorthodox, dismissing this approach without further exploration would be short-sighted. The board exchanged glances, weighing the competing concerns. What exactly are you proposing, Sarah? Peterson asked finally. A limited engagement with Mr. Harrison as a technical consultant working under Dr. Patel's direct supervision. All work conducted on-site with no access to our servers or proprietary data beyond what's necessary for the specific design challenge. Robert shook his head. The optics alone, the optics of successfully bringing Nerve Restore to market months ahead of schedule would overwhelm any temporary concerns. Sarah interrupted. This isn't about appearances, Dad. It's about fulfilling our mission to patients waiting for this treatment. The invocation of patients, the ultimate purpose behind their work, shifted something in the room. Even Robert couldn't argue against their core mission. After further discussion and numerous conditions, the board reluctantly approved a 4-week consulting arrangement. As members filtered out, Robert lingered, waiting until they were alone. You took an enormous risk, he said quietly. Sarah met his gaze. I learned from you that sometimes the most important breakthroughs require calculated risks. There's nothing calculated about the way you've handled this situation. Robert's concern was evident. I've watched you build walls around yourself since the accident. Professionally impeccable, personally isolated. Now suddenly this mechanic appears and those walls come down overnight. It worries me. Sarah felt her defenses rise. This isn't about James personally. It's about his solution to our problem. Is it? Robert challenged gently. Because what I witnessed at his workshop wasn't strictly professional interest. Sarah didn't immediately respond, the truth of his observation landing uncomfortably. My personal life isn't relevant to this discussion. It is when it affects your judgment as CEO, Robert countered. Sarah, I'm not just speaking as chairman of this company. I'm speaking as your father. I don't want to see you hurt. The genuine concern in his voice softened to her response. Dad, I appreciate your worry, but I'm not the fragile creature you've imagined since my accident. I don't need protection from living my life. Robert studied his daughter with a mixture of pride and lingering concern. Just promise me you'll proceed carefully with both the project and whatever else might be developing. I always do, Sarah assured him, though they both recognized the half-truth in her words. Later that afternoon, James arrived for his first official day as a consultant. Security escorted him to a specially prepared lab where Dr. Patel waited with Sarah. James surveyed the space with appreciation. Quite an upgrade from my workshop. Consider it your temporary home for the next month, Sarah replied, professionally conscious of Dr. Patel's presence. You'll have everything needed to develop the prototype here. James noted the shift in Sarah's demeanor, from the relaxed interaction at his workshop to this carefully maintained professional distance. The board approved this arrangement. Conditionally, Sarah acknowledged, with significant oversight. Dr. Patel stepped forward. We've prepared the non-proprietary specifications for the delivery mechanism. You'll work directly with me on implementation. And you'll report to Dr. Patel exclusively. Sarah added, the constraint evident in her tone. To avoid any appearance of Impropriety. James understood immediately. Of course, keeping everything above board makes sense. An awkward silence descended broken when Dr. Patel tactfully mentioned needing additional reference materials, leaving them momentarily alone. Your father must have been thrilled about this arrangement, James observed wryly. Sarah's professional mask slipped slightly. Thrilled isn't quite the word. Reluctantly acquiescent might be more accurate. I'm surprised he agreed at all after our encounter. He agreed because the technical merit of your proposal is undeniable, Sarah replied, though the conditions attached would make most consultants run for the exit. James smiled slightly. Good thing I'm used to challenging constraints. It's basically my entire business model. Their eyes met briefly, conveying more than their careful words. The connection that had formed so quickly between them hadn't diminished despite the formal setting. This needs to succeed, James, Sarah said quietly. Not just for the company or the patients who need this treatment. For us, he supplied when she hesitated. Sarah glanced toward the hallway where Dr. Patel would return any moment. For the vindication of my judgment in bringing you into this project. James understood her caution, but saw beyond it. Then we'd better make sure it succeeds spectacularly. Over the following days, James immersed himself in the delivery system development. The lab became his domain, with Dr. Patel providing necessary context about the pharmaceutical requirements, while carefully avoiding details about the specific compound. Despite the constraints, the work progressed rapidly. By the end of the first week, James had built a working prototype of the microinfusion mechanism. Sarah attended the initial testing, with several board members watching, as the device successfully delivered a test solution with minimal tissue reaction in laboratory conditions. Remarkable progress, Peterson commented grudgingly. The real challenge comes with miniaturization and integration with the delivery medium, James explained, but the core concept is sound. The successful demonstration eased some tensions, but Sarah noticed Robert remained reserved, watching James with lingering suspicion. The board's conditional approval hadn't resolved his fundamental concern about trusting an outsider with such crucial technology. As the second week began, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to the lab, observing the collaboration between James and Dr. Patel's team. The prototype evolved daily, each iteration solving problems the research staff had struggled with for months. After a particularly successful test run, Sarah lingered as others departed for the evening. James continued working, his focus absolute, as he adjusted a microscopic component with delicate precision. You should take a break occasionally, Sarah advised from the doorway. The security team reports you are often here past midnight. James looked up, surprised to find her still present. Time disappears when I'm solving problems. An old habit. Sarah wheeled into the room, closing the distance between them. For the first time in days, they were truly alone. The board is impressed with your progress, she said, maintaining the professional tone she'd adopted since his official hiring. But your father isn't, James observed perceptively. Sarah sighed. He's cautious by nature, especially when it comes to you, James finished. Their eyes met, the pretense of pure professionalism momentarily suspended. My accident changed him, Sarah admitted. He'd already lost my mother, nearly losing me as well. It made him overprotective. James set down his tools, giving her his full attention. What happened, the accident, I mean? You've never really talked about it. Sarah rarely discussed the crash with anyone, the memories still painfully vivid after 5 years. Yet something about James's direct, unguarded interest made her willing to revisit that day. I was driving back from a conference in Boston. Rainstorm, poor visibility, a truck hydroplaned across the median. Her voice remained steady, reciting facts rather than emotions. The collision crushed my car. Spinal cord injury at T10. I spent 6 months in rehabilitation learning how to navigate the world from this chair. James listened without interruption, without the awkward sympathy or morbid curiosity such stories typically evoked. Your father blamed himself, he asked quietly. Sarah looked surprised. How did you know? Because that's what family does. My sister's accident wasn't my fault either, but I carried that guilt for years. Still do sometimes. The shared understanding created a moment of connection that transcended their carefully maintained boundaries. He wanted me to step down as CEO, Sarah confided. Thought running the company would be too much stress during recovery. When I refused, he became my fiercest defender and my most vigilant watchdog simultaneously. Loving someone while letting them take risks is the hardest balance, James observed. I struggle with it daily with Katie. Sarah found herself drawn to this side of James, the unexpected wisdom beneath his practical exterior. How old was she when your sister died? 12, pain flickered across his face, old enough to understand what was happening, young enough to still need a parent. I did my best, but you raised a remarkable young woman, Sarah said gently. That much was obvious at your workshop. Their conversation continued, personal revelations interwoven with discussions about the project. Neither noticed the hours passing until a security guard's routine check interrupted them. I should go, Sarah said, suddenly aware of how this extended private conversation might appear. James nodded, understanding the complex politics surrounding their association. For what it's worth, I think your father's instinct to protect you comes from love, even when it's misguided. I know, Sarah acknowledged, but at some point protection becomes a prison of its own. The words hung between them as they parted, both recognizing the multiple layers of meaning they contained. The following morning, Sarah was surprised to find Richard Forrester, the marketing director, waiting outside her office. We need to talk about the Nerve Restore announcement, he began without preamble once they were inside. Sarah's guard immediately rose. Forrester had been the most vocal proponent of the ethically questionable marketing approach she'd rejected before involving James. The announcement is premature until we've completed the delivery system testing, she reminded him. But we need to begin positioning now, Forrester insisted, especially with rumors circulating about Biotech Solutions' competing product. Sarah stilled. What rumors? Forrester displayed several industry blog articles on his tablet. Sources suggest they're fast-tracking a neural regeneration treatment with claims that sound remarkably similar to Nerve Restore's projected outcomes. Sarah scanned the articles with growing concern. The descriptions were indeed similar to their proprietary approach. Too similar for coincidence. How recent are these rumors? They started appearing last week, Forrester replied, about the same time we brought Harrison on board. The implication was unmistakable. Sarah felt a chill despite her immediate rejection of the suggestion. If you're implying, I'm not implying anything, Forrester interrupted smoothly, just noting the timing, and suggesting we accelerate our communication strategy in response. After Forrester departed, Sarah sat motionless, the articles still displayed on the tablet. The timing was troubling, though she refused to believe James would betray their trust after everything he'd shared. Still, she couldn't ignore the possibility entirely, not with the company's future at stake. She arranged for IT security to review all laboratory access logs and data transfers since James's arrival. The investigation revealed nothing suspicious, but the seed of doubt had been planted, sprouting unwelcome questions. That afternoon, a board meeting was hastily convened to discuss the Biotech Solutions rumors. Sarah found herself in the uncomfortable position of defending James while acknowledging the serious concerns. Nothing in our security logs indicates any improper access or data transfer, she assured the anxious board members. And the conceptual similarities could easily result from parallel development paths. Neural regeneration has limited viable approaches. Robert, however, remained unconvinced. The timing is too convenient to dismiss. We need to consider the possibility that Harrison is feeding information to his former employer. Sarah maintained her composure despite her internal turmoil. That's a serious accusation without evidence. We can't afford to wait for conclusive evidence, Peterson argued. If there's even a possibility of information leakage, we need to act. The debate continued, growing increasingly heated until Barnes proposed a dramatic step. We should terminate the consultation immediately and initiate legal action to protect our intellectual property. Based on rumors and timing, Sarah challenged, her voice rising. Without a shred of actual evidence. Based on prudent business judgment, Barnes countered. The risks now outweigh the potential benefits. Sarah glanced around the table, seeing the momentum building against James. If we terminate his consultation now, we lose the delivery system innovation that could bring Nerve Restore to market months earlier than projected. Are we willing to sacrifice that advantage based on circumstantial concerns? Her passionate defense gave the board pause. After further discussion, they reached a compromise. The consultation would continue, but under enhanced security protocols, including video surveillance of the laboratory and restrictions on James's communications while on site. Sarah left the meeting deeply troubled. The additional security measures felt like a personal betrayal of the trust she'd placed in James, yet she couldn't fully dismiss the board's concerns without appearing negligent. When she informed James of the new restrictions, his initial reaction was controlled disappointment rather than indignation. "I understand their perspective," he said quietly. "In their position, I might have similar concerns." "You're being remarkably understanding about essentially being treated as a corporate spy," Sarah observed. James shrugged slightly. "Trust has to be earned in this context. I haven't had enough time to build that yet." His reasonable response only deepened Sarah's internal conflict. Every interaction with James reinforced her instinctive trust in him, yet the circumstances demanded professional caution. "There's something else," she admitted reluctantly. "The board wanted a complete background investigation. They've hired a security firm to review your history with Biotech Solutions in detail." Now James' expression hardened. "My separation agreement includes confidentiality clauses that prevent me from discussing specifics about my work there." "I know, but Sarah acknowledged. "I argued against it but was overruled." James was silent for a moment, calculating implications. "Will this investigation interfere with our work here?" "Not directly," Sarah assured him, "but any complications that arise could affect the board's willingness to continue the arrangement." "By complications, you mean evidence that I'm not who I claim to be," James stated bluntly, "that I might be working against Maxwell's interests." The directness of his statement created an uncomfortable silence. "I don't believe that," Sarah said finally, "but my personal belief isn't enough for the board." James studied her, carefully recognizing the difficult position she occupied, caught between personal trust and professional responsibility. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I understand the caution, and I have nothing to hide that would compromise this project." His calm acceptance eased some of Sarah's tension, though the situation remained precarious. As days passed, James continued his work despite the increased scrutiny. The prototype development advanced steadily, each successful test reinforcing the viability of his approach. Yet Sarah sensed a subtle withdrawal in their interactions, a professional courtesy replacing the genuine connection they'd begun to build. The security investigation proceeded in parallel, revealing nothing overtly suspicious, but uncovering details about James's departure from Biotech Solutions that raised new questions. According to former colleagues, James had become increasingly concerned about the safety profile of a drug delivery system before his sudden exit. When confronted with these findings, James's response was measured. "As I've said, my non-disclosure agreement prevents specific disclosures. But yes, I raised safety concerns that were not adequately addressed. The investigation suggests you threatened to take proprietary information to regulators." Robert pressed during a tense meeting in Sarah's office. "I threatened to report safety concerns to the appropriate authorities," James corrected carefully. "There's a significant difference." The distinction didn't satisfy Robert. "Either way, you were willing to violate confidentiality when it suited your purposes." When patient safety was at stake, James countered, his composure finally showing cracks. "I'd make the same choice again under similar circumstances." Sarah intervened before the confrontation escalated further. "The investigation has revealed nothing that compromises Mr. Harrison's work here. The delivery system development continues to exceed expectations." Robert turned his frustration toward his daughter. "Your willingness to defend him despite mounting red flags concerns me deeply, Sarah, both professionally and personally." The implication wasn't subtle. Sarah felt her temper rising but maintained her executive composure. "My assessment is based on measurable results and observed behavior, not speculation." After Robert departed, an uncomfortable silence stretched between Sarah and James. "He's not entirely wrong to be concerned," James acknowledged finally. "My history with biotech does raise legitimate questions." "Would you really have gone to regulators?" Sarah asked directly. James met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes, because the alternative was remaining silent while a flawed delivery system potentially harmed patients. Some lines shouldn't be crossed regardless of legal consequences." His answer resonated with Sarah's own ethical framework, the principles her mother had instilled in her and upon which Maxwell Pharmaceuticals had been founded. "Thank you for your honesty," she said quietly. "Always," he replied simply. That single word carried weight beyond their professional relationship, a promise that extended into the personal connection neither could fully acknowledge within these walls. As the third week of development began, unexpected complications arose with the prototype. The microinfusion mechanism performed flawlessly in isolation, but integration with the actual pharmaceutical compound revealed unexpected molecular interactions. The polymer matrix is destabilizing when exposed to the compound's pH level, Dr. Patel explained during an emergency project meeting. James studied the test results with intense concentration. We need to recalibrate the buffer solution and possibly redesign the contact materials. That could set us back weeks, Dr. Patel warned. Not necessarily, James countered. If we approach this as a materials science problem rather than a pharmaceutical one, the technical discussion continued, possible solutions emerging through their collaborative analysis. Sarah observed their interaction with admiration, two brilliant minds approaching a complex challenge from complementary perspectives. As the meeting concluded, a junior researcher hurried in with disturbing news. We've just received information that Biotech Solutions is announcing a major breakthrough in neural regeneration therapy next week. The room fell silent as implications registered. If biotech was indeed preparing to announce a treatment similar to Nerve Restore, the timing could devastate Maxwell's market position. Do we have details on their announcement? Sarah asked sharply. Only rumors from industry contacts, the researcher admitted. But they're conducting a major press event with clinical investigators present. All eyes turned unconsciously toward James, the unspoken suspicion palpable. He met their gazes steadily, his expression revealing nothing but professional concern. We need to focus on solving our immediate technical challenge, he said calmly. Speculation about competitors won't help the patients waiting for this treatment. His redirection worked temporarily, returning attention to the prototype issues. But as the meeting dispersed, Sarah noticed several team members watching James with poorly disguised suspicion. Later that evening, Sarah received an urgent call from Marcus. The security firm delivered their final report on Harrison, he informed her. Your father has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. What did they find? Sarah demanded. I don't know specifics, Marcus admitted, but your father's expression when he reviewed it wasn't good, Sarah. Sleep eluded her that night as possibilities churned through her mind. Had she misjudged James so completely? The evidence of his brilliance and dedication to the project was undeniable, yet the mounting coincidences couldn't be ignored entirely. The next morning, Sarah arrived early to review the security report before the board meeting. What she found shocked her, not because it implicated James, but because it revealed the extent of biotech's unethical practices. According to former colleagues interviewed confidentially, James had discovered that biotech was suppressing serious adverse event data from clinical trials of a delivery system similar to what they were currently developing. His ethical concerns had been dismissed by management, leading to his ultimatum and subsequent departure. Most significantly, the report included documentation showing that biotech had continued developing the problematic technology, the same technology they were apparently preparing to announce. When the board convened, Robert immediately went on the offensive. The security investigation confirms Harrison had direct access to proprietary information at Biotech Solutions relevant to our Nerve Restore delivery system. It also confirms he left specifically because of ethical concerns about that technology. Sarah countered, distributing copies of the key findings, concerns that Biotech Solutions chose to ignore, which doesn't explain how they're suddenly announcing a breakthrough in the same area we're developing, Barnes argued. Actually, it suggests something far more troubling, Sarah replied, that biotech may be rushing an unsafe delivery system to market to beat us to announcement. The room fell silent as the implications registered. If that's true, Peterson said slowly, they're potentially putting patients at risk for market advantage. Exactly what James tried to prevent by raising concerns internally, Sarah emphasized, before being forced out for his ethical stance. The discussion continued, the perspective gradually shifting as board members absorbed the fuller context of James's history with biotech. While suspicions weren't completely dispelled, the narrative of corporate whistleblower began to seem more plausible than corporate spy. As the meeting concluded without definitive action against James, Robert approached Sarah privately. You may be right about Harrison's ethics, he acknowledged reluctantly, But that doesn't explain the timing of biotech's announcement coinciding with our development breakthrough. Unless, Sarah began, a disturbing possibility forming. Unless they have another source of information about our progress. Robert's expression darkened. You think we have a security breach? I think we need to consider all possibilities, Sarah replied carefully, including ones that don't involve James. The investigation took an unexpected turn that afternoon when IT security detected unusual access patterns to the Nerve Restore project files. The source wasn't James's credentials, but those of Richard Forrester, the marketing director, who had first raised concerns about biotech's announcement. When confronted with the evidence, Forrester initially denied any impropriety, but faced with specific access logs and unexplained communications with biotech executives, his denials crumbled. They approached me months ago, he finally admitted in Sarah's office, Robert and security personnel present, offered significant compensation for information about our development timeline. You've been spying for our competitor, Robert's voice vibrated with barely controlled fury. Providing strategic insights, Forrester attempted to qualify. Nothing that compromised the technology itself, except our development schedule, marketing strategy, and clinical trial design, Sarah enumerated coldly, all while attempting to direct suspicion toward James Harrison. The revelation validated Sarah's instinctive trust in James while exposing a profound breach within their executive ranks. As security escorted Forrester from the building, Robert looked shaken. I misjudged the situation completely, he admitted to Sarah. And Harrison as well. We all make errors in judgment, Sarah replied, though the vindication felt hollow given the damage Forrester's betrayal had caused to both the project and her relationship with James. That evening, Sarah went directly to the lab, where James continued working despite the day's dramatic events. He looked up as she entered, his expression carefully neutral. I heard about Forrester, he said simply. I owe you an apology, Sarah began, for the suspicion, the investigation, all of it. James set down his tools, considering her words. No, you don't. You did what any responsible CEO would do when facing a potential security threat. That doesn't make it right, Sarah insisted. I knew you better than that. Did you? James questioned gently. We've known each other for less than a month, Sarah. Under ordinary circumstances, your caution would be entirely appropriate. His reasonableness only deepened her regret. These aren't ordinary circumstances. Their eyes met, acknowledging the unspoken truth between them. Whatever had begun that night outside the restaurant had continued growing despite professional boundaries and corporate suspicions. No, James agreed quietly. They're not. The revelation of Forrester's betrayal sent ripples through Maxwell Pharmaceuticals over the following days. Sarah ordered a comprehensive security audit while accelerating work on the delivery system. With suspicion shifted away from James, the atmosphere in the lab transformed. The team's collaborative energy surged, fueled by a collective determination to overcome the remaining technical challenges. We've identified the molecular interaction causing destabilization, Dr. Patel announced during their morning briefing. It occurs when the polymer matrix encounters specific proteins in the target tissue. James studied the data intently. The interaction doesn't happen in isolated testing because we weren't replicating the complete biological environment. Exactly, Dr. Patel confirmed, but how do we solve it? James sketched a modification to the delivery system's outer membrane. What if we add an intermediary buffer layer? Something that creates a temporary microenvironment around the injection site before the active compound is released. The technical discussion continued for hours, the solution evolving through collaborative problem solving. By evening, they had a promising approach. A dual-phase delivery system that would protect the compound from tissue interaction until properly absorbed. We'll need to rebuild the prototype completely, James cautioned, and time is running short. Sarah checked the calendar. Biotech's announcement is scheduled for next Wednesday. That gives us 6 days. To not only rebuild the prototype but validate it through sufficient testing, Dr. Patel added. It's aggressive. James looked between them, determination evident in his expression. Then we'd better get started. The next morning, Robert Maxwell appeared unexpectedly in the laboratory. His presence created an immediate tension as he approached James, who was deep in fabrication work. Mr. Harrison, Robert began formally, I owe you an apology. James set down his tools, surprised by this unexpected gesture. No apology necessary, Mr. Maxwell. Your concerns were understandable given the circumstances. Robert shook his head. My suspicions went beyond reasonable caution. They were personal and unfounded. Sarah, observing from the doorway, felt a complex mixture of emotions at her father's humility. Pride in his character, relief at his acceptance of James, and lingering frustration at the weeks of needless conflict. I was wrong about your intentions, Robert continued, and about your character. The board has authorized me to extend your consultation agreement indefinitely should you wish to continue beyond the current project. James glanced briefly at Sarah before responding. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Maxwell, but let's focus on completing this project successfully before discussing future arrangements. Robert nodded, his respect visibly growing. A pragmatic approach. I can see why my daughter values your contribution so highly. The acknowledgement, though simple, represented a significant shift. Sarah stepped forward, joining the conversation. The modified prototype design is exceptional. James and Dr. Patel have solved challenges our team struggled with for months. Then I'll leave you to your work, Robert concluded, but I'd like to be kept informed of your progress, particularly in light of biotech's upcoming announcement. After Robert departed, James turned to Sarah with a questioning look. Indefinite consultation, the board's idea, not mine, she clarified, though I support it if you're interested. Let's see if we survive the next week first, James replied pragmatically. Rebuilding this prototype under deadline pressure will be challenge enough. The days blurred together as the team worked around the clock. James practically lived in the laboratory, catching brief naps on a cot they'd brought in. Sarah divided her time between executive responsibilities and the project, often bringing dinner for the team during late-night sessions. During one such evening, with most staff departed and Dr. Patel briefly away, consulting with the materials team, Sarah and James found themselves alone in the lab. You should get some real rest, Sarah advised, noting the fatigue evident in his posture. This pace isn't sustainable. James continued, calibrating a minute component. I've worked under worse conditions. During my sister's final months, I was developing adaptive technology for her during the day and staying at the hospital nights. The casual mention of such personal sacrifice caught Sarah off guard. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. It taught me something important, James replied, finally looking up from his work. That some deadlines matter more than others. This one matters. Because of the competition with biotech, James shook his head, because of what this treatment means for patients. Every day we delay is another day someone suffers unnecessarily. The simple statement reflected the core mission that had originally drawn Sarah to pharmaceutical development, the human impact behind the clinical trials and market strategies. That was my mother's philosophy, she said quietly. She would have liked you. James smiled slightly. High praise from what you have told me about her. The highest, Sarah confirmed. Their eyes met the professional distance they'd maintained, crumbling under the weight of shared purpose and growing personal connection. The moment was interrupted by Dr. Patel's return. If she noticed the charged atmosphere, she gave no indication, launching directly into a discussion of material compatibility issues. The following days passed in a blur of technical challenges and breakthrough moments. James's experience with adaptive technology provided innovative approaches to problems that had stymied traditional pharmaceutical engineering. By Monday afternoon, just 2 days before biotech's scheduled announcement, they had a functioning prototype ready for final testing. The entire executive team gathered in the laboratory as Dr. Patel prepared the demonstration. The tension was palpable. Months of development, millions in investment, and the company's market position all hinged on this moment. The test will simulate the actual tissue conditions, Dr. Patel explained. Success means the delivery system maintains stability while releasing the compound at the prescribed rate. Sarah watched James closely. Despite his outward calm, she recognized the intensity in his focus. This mattered to him beyond professional pride or contractual obligation. The test began. For several minutes, nothing appeared to happen as monitoring equipment tracked microscopic interactions. Then gradually, data began populating the screens. Compound dispersion rates, tissue reaction measurements, stability indicators, all showing results significantly better than their previous best attempts. It's working, Dr. Patel announced, her typical scientific reserve breaking into uncharacteristic excitement. The buffer layer is performing exactly as designed. Relief and elation swept through the room. Board members exchanged congratulatory glances, while researchers who had worked for months on the problem broke into spontaneous applause. Robert approached James, extending his hand. "Remarkable work, Mr. Harrison. Truly remarkable." James accepted the handshake. It was a team effort. Dr. Patel's insights were crucial to the final design. "Nevertheless, the core innovation was yours," Robert acknowledged, "and it may well have saved our most important project." As the celebration continued, Harold Barnes raised an important question. "This success changes our strategic position, but biotech's announcement is still coming in 2 days. How do we respond?" The question sobered the room immediately. Sarah considered their options, exchanging a meaningful glance with her father. "We have two choices," she began. "We can accelerate our own announcement to preempt theirs, or we can wait to see what they're actually bringing to market." "The first option carries significant risk," Robert cautioned. "Our testing is preliminary. Making public claims now could backfire if longer-term trials reveal unforeseen issues. And the second option potentially cedes first-mover advantage," Peterson countered. "If biotech announces similar technology, even with flaws, they'll capture investor attention and possibly patients' hopes." James, who had remained silent during the strategic discussion, finally spoke. "There's a third option you haven't considered." All eyes turned to him questioningly. "Contact biotech directly," he suggested. "Express concerns about the safety of their delivery system based on the issues I identified before leaving. Offer to share our breakthrough in exchange for a collaborative approach to bringing this treatment to patients." The suggestion was met with stunned silence. Collaboration with their chief competitor seemed unthinkable after Forrester's betrayal. "That's not how the pharmaceutical industry typically operates," Barnes said finally. "Perhaps it should be," James replied simply, "at least when patient safety is at stake." Sarah studied James thoughtfully. His suggestion aligned perfectly with the ethical principles her mother had established, principles that sometimes conflicted with business realities. "It would be an unprecedented approach," she acknowledged, "but it merits consideration, especially if biotech is indeed rushing an unsafe delivery system to market." Robert shook his head. "The board would never approve such outreach without substantial evidence of actual danger to patients." "What if we had that evidence?" James asked quietly. The room fell silent again as implications registered. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Harrison?" Robert asked carefully. James met his gaze steadily. "I maintained copies of the safety data that concerned me at biotech, data they subsequently buried. I couldn't use it publicly due to the non-disclosure agreement, but if Maxwell initiated contact on patient safety grounds, that would potentially violate your separation agreement," Sarah pointed out, concerned for his legal position. "Not if I'm responding to a good faith inquiry from a third party regarding public safety concerns," James countered. "The agreement has standard exclusions for such scenarios." The discussion continued intensely. Ethical considerations weighed against business, strategy, and legal risk. Eventually, a compromise emerged. They would accelerate preparation for their own announcement, while Sarah and Robert would unofficially approach biotech's CEO to express concerns about their delivery system. The next morning, Sarah and Robert arrived at Biotech Solutions headquarters for a hastily arranged meeting with CEO Richard Collins, the same man who had humiliated Sarah at the restaurant weeks earlier. Collins was visibly surprised when Sarah wheeled into his office alongside her father. "This is unexpected." Collins managed his discomfort evident. Their last encounter clearly remained fresh in his memory. "We're here to discuss a matter of mutual concern," Robert began formally. Collins regained his composure quickly. "If this is about tomorrow's announcement, I should warn you that attempts to interfere could be considered anti-competitive behavior." "This isn't about competition," Sarah stated firmly. "It's about patient safety." She proceeded to outline their concerns about biotech's delivery system, carefully avoiding direct reference to James or any confidential information. Instead, she focused on the technical challenges their own research had identified and overcome, challenges that would likely affect any similar technology. Collins's expression shifted from dismissive to concerned as the technical details mounted. "These are remarkably specific concerns," he observed suspiciously, "almost as if you had inside information about our development process." "We have inside information about physics and biochemistry," Sarah countered smoothly. The molecular interactions we're describing would affect any neural regeneration delivery system using the approach your company has been developing. Robert leaned forward. Our point, Mr. Collins, is that rushing such technology to market without addressing these fundamental issues could put patients at risk. While conveniently undermining our announcement, Collins noted cynically. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah outlined the third option James had suggested, a collaborative approach that would allow both companies to bring safe, effective treatments to market. Collins laughed incredulously. You want us to delay our announcement, share our proprietary technology with you, and announce jointly, after your consultant poached our intellectual property. No one poached anything, Robert stated firmly, and we're offering to share our delivery system innovations to ensure patient safety. A system developed by James Harrison, Collins retorted, a former biotech employee who violated his confidentiality obligations. Sarah's patience thinned. Mr. Harrison left because your company suppressed safety concerns about a flawed delivery system, the same system you're apparently preparing to announce tomorrow. The direct accusation landed like a physical blow. Collins' expression confirmed their suspicions before he could compose himself. That's a serious allegation, he managed finally. One we're prepared to substantiate, Robert added. We have copies of the original safety data. Collins paled visibly. That would constitute corporate espionage. Harrison signed a binding non-disclosure agreement, which contains standard exclusions for matters of public safety. Sarah countered, echoing James's earlier point. Exclusions that become relevant if you proceed with announcing a delivery system you know to be flawed. The tension in the room was palpable as Collins calculated his options. Finally, he asked his assistant to cancel his remaining morning meetings. Show me what you've developed, he requested, his tone shifting from adversarial to cautiously interested. Sarah nodded to Robert, who opened his tablet to display the testing results from their prototype. Our delivery system solves the tissue reaction issues through a dual-phase approach. The preliminary results are exceptional. For the next hour, the conversation transformed into a substantive technical discussion. Collins, despite his earlier hostility, was clearly impressed by the innovation. This is remarkable work, he admitted reluctantly, significantly beyond what our team has developed. Which is why collaboration makes sense, Sarah pressed. Your clinical expertise combined with our delivery technology could bring a superior treatment to market faster than either company could alone. Collins considered the proposal with newfound seriousness. The board would require significant concessions regarding intellectual property and revenue sharing. As would ours, Robert acknowledged, but a structured collaboration could benefit both companies. And most importantly, the patients waiting for these treatments. By the time they departed biotech headquarters, they had the framework of a preliminary agreement. Collins would delay the next day's announcement pending board approval of a joint development approach. When Sarah and Robert returned to Maxwell Pharmaceuticals and shared the outcome with James and Dr. Patel, the reactions were mixed. It's an encouraging start, Dr. Patel acknowledged cautiously. But pharmaceutical collaborations are notoriously difficult to structure equitably. And Collins isn't known for keeping his word, James added, his skepticism evident. What happens if they take this delay to copy our approach without proper attribution or compensation? Sarah understood his concern. That's why we've only provided conceptual information. The technical details remain proprietary until formal agreements are signed. And we're proceeding with our own announcement preparations regardless, Robert added pragmatically. If the collaboration fails, we'll be ready to move forward independently. As the others discussed implementation details, Sarah noticed James's unusually quiet demeanor. When the meeting concluded, she lingered behind with him in the laboratory. You don't seem satisfied with this outcome, she observed. James considered his response carefully. I'm concerned about Collins's true intentions. I've seen firsthand how he operates when profits conflict with ethics. You think he's playing us. I think he's buying time, James clarified. Time to evaluate whether your delivery system truly outperforms theirs and whether a collaboration serves their interests better than competition. Sarah acknowledged the possibility with a nod. That's why we're maintaining parallel paths. But if we can achieve a collaborative approach that brings better treatments to patients faster, isn't that worth pursuing? Absolutely, James agreed. I just don't want to see your company disadvantaged by biotech's tactics. I've witnessed them firsthand. His concern for Maxwell Pharmaceuticals' well-being touched Sarah. This isn't just business strategy for you, is it? James met her gaze directly. Nothing about this project has been just business for me, Sarah. Not from the beginning. The admission hung between them, acknowledging the deeper connection that had developed despite professional boundaries and corporate politics. For me either, Sarah admitted softly. Before they could continue, Marcus appeared at the laboratory door. Sarah, emergency board call in 10 minutes. Collins has gone public with a statement about industry-wide safety concerns in neural regeneration delivery systems. Sarah felt a surge of anger. He's using our warning as a market manipulation. James's expression darkened, buying time just as I suspected. The emergency board meeting confirmed their fears. Collins had issued a carefully worded press release expressing biotech's commitment to patient safety and announcing a delay in their breakthrough announcement to address recently identified technical considerations. He's framing it as biotech's ethical stand, Barnes fumed, while implying that the entire industry has been rushing unsafe technology to market. The stock market has already responded, Peterson added grimly. Our share price dropped 12% in the last hour. Investors are interpreting this as confirmation of problems with neural regeneration technology broadly. Sarah maintained her composure despite her fury at Collins's betrayal. We need to respond immediately with our own announcement, not defensive, triumphant. We've solved the delivery challenges he's obliquely referencing. With limited testing, Robert cautioned, are we prepared to make definitive claims about safety and efficacy? Not definitive, Sarah acknowledged. But we can announce the breakthrough in delivery system technology supported by our preliminary testing while emphasizing our commitment to thorough validation before market release. The board debated strategy intensely, eventually authorizing an accelerated announcement for the following morning. Sarah would lead a press conference showcasing the innovative delivery system with James and Dr. Patel providing technical context. As preparations proceeded frantically, James pulled Sarah aside. Collins will retaliate when he sees your announcement. He'll claim intellectual property theft based on my involvement. Let him, Sarah replied with steely determination. We've documented every step of our development process. Nothing in our technology derives from biotech's approach. In fact, we specifically designed around the flaws in their system. He won't care about facts, James warned. He'll create a legal and public relations nightmare to undermine your announcement. Sarah considered this warning thoughtfully. Then perhaps we need to neutralize that threat preemptively. That evening, while the marketing team prepared announcement materials, Sarah convened a private strategy session with Robert James and their legal counsel. The plan they developed was bold and potentially risky, but addressed the core vulnerability Collins might exploit. The next morning, Sarah wheeled onto the stage of Maxwell Pharmaceuticals' press auditorium, facing a packed room of journalists, industry analysts, and investors. Robert sat to her right, with James and Dr. Patel positioned strategically to her left, a visible statement of unified leadership. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Sarah began. Today, Maxwell Pharmaceuticals is announcing a significant breakthrough in drug delivery technology for neurodegenerative conditions. She outlined the core innovation in accessible terms, while Dr. Patel presented the impressive preliminary testing results. Throughout, Sarah emphasized their commitment to thorough validation before seeking regulatory approval. Unlike others in our industry, she stated pointedly, we believe patient safety must take precedence over market positioning or announcement timing. The reference to biotech's postponed announcement wasn't lost on the assembled press. Questions immediately focused on the timing and implied criticism of competitor practices. Ms. Maxwell, are you suggesting that Biotech Solutions delayed their announcement due to safety concerns you identified? A reporter from the Wall Street Journal asked directly. Sarah's response was carefully measured. I can't speak to biotech's internal decision-making. What I can confirm is that Maxwell Pharmaceuticals has solved a significant delivery challenge that affects neural regeneration treatments broadly. Does your breakthrough involve technology developed by James Harrison during his time at Biotech Solutions? Another journalist pressed exactly as they had anticipated. Sarah turned to James, who addressed the question directly. The delivery system we've developed at Maxwell Pharmaceuticals employs fundamentally different approaches than anything under development at biotech during my tenure there. In fact, we specifically designed around known limitations in existing approaches. A reporter from Bloomberg persisted. But given your previous role at biotech, isn't there an inherent intellectual property conflict? This was the opening they had planned for. Sarah nodded to Robert, who took over smoothly. We anticipated this question, Robert stated, which is why we've taken an unprecedented step to ensure transparency and proper attribution. He gestured to their legal counsel, who distributed information packets to key journalists. We've commissioned an independent technical analysis from the Stevens Institute of Technology comparing our delivery system innovation with publicly available information about similar technologies. Their report, which you're receiving now, confirms the novel nature of our approach. The room buzzed with surprise at this unusual level of disclosure. As journalists examined the materials, Sarah delivered the final element of their strategy. Additionally, Maxwell Pharmaceuticals is announcing a patient access initiative that will include reasonable licensing terms for our delivery technology to other pharmaceutical companies developing treatments for neurodegenerative conditions. This announcement created an even greater stir. Licensing breakthrough technology to competitors was rare in the fiercely competitive pharmaceutical industry. To be clear, Sarah continued, we believe patients shouldn't have to wait for corporate litigation to resolve before accessing life-changing treatments. Our delivery system innovation will be available for licensing under terms that protect our intellectual property while encouraging broad adoption for patient benefit. The press conference continued for another 30 minutes with technical questions addressed by Dr. Patel and James. Throughout, Sarah maintained the careful balance between corporate confidence and ethical commitment that had been her mother's trademark. As the event concluded, Robert leaned close to Sarah. Collins is going to be apoplectic. This completely undercuts his potential legal strategy. While positioning us as industry leaders focused on patient outcomes rather than corporate warfare, Sarah added with satisfaction. Exactly as Mom would have done. The market response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. By day's end, Maxwell Pharmaceuticals stock had not only recovered from the previous day's decline, but surged to a 2-year high. Industry analysts praised both the technical innovation and the ethical leadership demonstrated by the licensing initiative. Late that evening, as the executive team celebrated their successful announcement, Sarah received an unexpected call from Richard Collins himself. A masterful performance today, Sarah, he began, his tone a mixture of grudging respect and barely concealed fury. Though your patient access initiative is transparently self-serving. It serves patients first and our company second, Sarah corrected calmly, which was always the point. Your licensing offer makes a direct legal challenge problematic for us, Collins acknowledged. Very clever. It wasn't about outmaneuvering you, Richard, Sarah replied, though they both knew that was partially true. It was about finding a path forward that serves patients best. Always the idealist, Collins scoffed, just like your mother. The comparison intended as dismissive filled Sarah with quiet pride. Thank you for noticing the resemblance. My offer of collaboration remains open should you reconsider. After ending the call, Sarah found James waiting outside her office, his expression questioning. Collins, he guessed accurately. Sarah nodded, acknowledging our checkmate more or less. You outmaneuvered a man who built his career on corporate manipulation, James observed with admiration, while maintaining ethical principles that would make your mother proud. The simple validation meant more to Sarah than the day's public triumph. I couldn't have done it without your innovation, or your insight into Collins's likely tactics. A fortunate alignment of complementary skills, James suggested with a smile. Sarah studied him thoughtfully. More than that, I think. We balance each other in ways that make both of us better. The observation hung between them, laden with implications that extended beyond their professional collaboration. For weeks, they had maintained careful boundaries, focusing on the urgent project that had brought them together. Now, with that crisis navigated successfully, the unacknowledged personal connection demanded attention. The board extended your consultation agreement indefinitely, Sarah reminded him. But I realize you have your own business to consider. James nodded slowly. The workshop has been managing without me, though not indefinitely. Katie has stepped up admirably, but my clients need me too. So what happens now? Sarah asked the question encompassing far more than professional arrangements. I've been considering that, James admitted. What if we formalized a partnership between Harrison Adaptive Technologies and Maxwell Pharmaceuticals, a joint research initiative focused on delivery systems for people with mobility and neurological challenges? The proposal was unexpectedly perfect, addressing both their professional futures and the possibility of continued collaboration. A separate entity co-funded but independently operated, Sarah expanded thoughtfully, combining pharmaceutical expertise with adaptive technology innovation. Exactly, James confirmed. We could develop solutions that neither company could create alone. The board would need convincing, Sarah cautioned. Corporate partnerships have complex governance challenges. I'm getting quite good at convincing skeptical boards, James replied with a hint of humor. With the right CEO advocating for the vision. Their eyes met in shared understanding. This wasn't just about business or structure, but about creating a future where they could continue working together while honoring their separate responsibilities. It's worth exploring, Sarah agreed, but there's another matter we should address first. The personal implications, James suggested directly. Sarah nodded, appreciating his straightforwardness. We've maintained professional boundaries throughout this project, necessarily so given the stakes and scrutiny. But now we have choices to make, James finished, about what happens beyond the laboratory and boardroom. Exactly, Sarah confirmed, and those choices come with complications. My position as CEO, your independent business, the public nature of any relationship between us. James considered these realities thoughtfully. Complications, yes, but not insurmountable ones. Not if what's developing between us matters enough. The simple statement cut through corporate politics and strategic considerations to the essential question. Sarah found herself smiling despite the complexity ahead. It matters, she said quietly, more than I expected when a mechanic rescued me from a disastrous blind date. James returned her smile, crossing the professional distance between them for the first time. Then we'll figure out the rest one step at a time. 2 weeks later, the Maxwell Pharmaceuticals Board unanimously approved the formation of Maxwell Harrison Neurotech, a joint research initiative with Harrison Adaptive Technologies. The press release emphasized the complementary expertise both companies brought to addressing challenges in neurological treatment delivery. What the announcement didn't mention was the dinner Sarah and James shared that evening to celebrate their new professional partnership and to continue exploring the personal connection that had flourished despite corporate politics and competitive pressures. As they sat on the patio of a small restaurant, far from the upscale establishment where they'd first met, Sarah found herself reflecting on the unlikely journey that had brought them together. If Richard hadn't been so awful that night, we might never have met, she observed. James considered this with amusement. I'm not sure whether to send him a thank you note or not. Probably not, Sarah advised with a laugh. His ego is sufficiently inflated without knowing he accidentally facilitated a competitor's breakthrough. Their conversation flowed naturally between professional achievements and personal revelations. The artificial boundaries that had constrained their interaction finally dissolved. The licensing initiative has already received applications from 3 companies, Sarah shared, including surprisingly a subsidiary of Biotech Solutions. Collins is nothing if not pragmatic, James observed. He recognizes superior technology when he sees it, even if he'd never admit that publicly. Sarah nodded in agreement. The Patient Access Initiative is projected to bring nerve restore compatible treatments to market at least 18 months earlier than if each company developed delivery systems independently. Your mother would be proud, James said softly. You've transformed a corporate competition into a patient-focused collaboration. While maintaining a competitive advantage through innovation rather than obstruction, Sarah added, the board is quite pleased with the financial projections as well as the ethical positioning. As their meal concluded, James suggested a detour before returning home. There's somewhere I'd like to take you if you were willing to trust me with a surprise. Sarah agreed with curiosity. Their driver followed James's directions to a secluded section of shoreline just outside the city limits. A wooden boardwalk extended onto the beach, accessible for Sarah's wheelchair. I discovered this place when Katie was younger, James explained as they moved along the boardwalk. It's one of the few truly accessible beaches in the area. designed by an architect with mobility challenges himself. They reached the end of the boardwalk where a viewing platform extended slightly over the sand. The setting sun cast the ocean in brilliant golds and reds. The horizon stretched endlessly before them. "It's beautiful," Sarah said softly, breathing in the salt air. James nodded in agreement. "But that's not why I brought you here." He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small device Sarah didn't recognize. "This is a prototype I've been developing in my spare time, a temporary mobility assistance system designed for brief standing periods on uneven surfaces." Sarah studied the compact mechanism with professional interest. Adaptive technology for beach access. Among other applications, James confirmed. It works in conjunction with upper body strength for someone with your level of spinal injury. Completely optional, of course, but I thought you might like to feel the sand beneath your feet, if you're interested. The thoughtful consideration behind the offer touched Sarah deeply. Unlike the countless people who had pushed unwanted solutions on her since her accident, James had created an option without expectation or pressure, and only revealed it when appropriate. "I would like to try," she decided. "It's been 5 years since I felt sand between my toes." With James's patient assistance, Sarah transferred from her wheelchair and attached the supportive device to her legs. It wasn't a full exoskeleton, but a minimalist support system that worked with her natural movement capabilities while providing critical stability. Standing carefully with James's steady hand supporting her, Sarah took her first steps onto the beach. The sensation of sand yielding beneath her feet was simultaneously foreign and achingly familiar. "How does it feel?" James asked quietly. Sarah couldn't immediately answer, overwhelmed by the simple pleasure of an experience she had thought permanently lost. "Like reclaiming a piece of myself," she managed finally. They stood together as twilight descended the boundary between sky and ocean, gradually blurring into indistinct beauty. In that moment, Sarah recognized the profound truth that had drawn them together from their first meeting. Not just shared values or complementary skills, but a fundamental understanding that limitations, whether physical or circumstantial, were never the end of possibility. "Thank you for this," she said softly. "Not just the device or in this moment, but for seeing me completely from the beginning, not defined by what I lost, but recognized for everything I am." James's response was simple, but encompassed everything that had developed between them. "That's not a gift I gave you, Sarah. It's a truth we showed each other." As darkness settled around them, they made their way back to the boardwalk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a partnership to build innovations to develop corporate politics to navigate. But tonight they had claimed something precious and personal, beyond professional achievements or corporate strategies. They had rediscovered that sometimes healing begins with disaster, and sometimes the right person appears precisely when the world seems to turn its back. For both Sarah and James, damaged in different ways by life's harsh turns, the second path to happiness had arrived unexpectedly. Through a chance encounter that had grown into something neither could have anticipated, but both now recognized as invaluable.